It was noon on Friday, February 16, 1883, when a lookout on the White Star liner Republic reported a vessel far off on the horizon. It had not been an easy passage. For days, the 3,700-ton Oceanic-class Republic battled through heavy weather. Many passengers spent most of the voyage in their bunks, seasick from the constant rolling and pitching. Despite the turbulent seas, the capable liner was designed to handle the worst that the North Atlantic could throw at her, and she was handling the winter gale with ease. But the ship spotted on the horizon was not so lucky. She appeared to be in distress, battered by the relentless waves. As soon as she was sighted, the Republic changed course and hove to alongside the ailing vessel. The ill-fated ship was a 1,700-ton cargo steamer called the Glamorgan. The powerless ship bobbed helplessly in the roiling sea. She was badly damaged. Her midship was gutted, and her foremast was missing. Captain Irving of the Republic ordered a lifeboat lowered. The brave crew assigned to the small wooden boat, led by Chief Officer Barrett, struggled to keep from overturning. As they were tossed around, an able-bodied seaman named Forrester was thrown into the sea and drowned. After a mighty battle, the boat finally managed to reach the stricken vessel and returned to the Republic with 3 crew members, including Glamorgan's chief officer, May. As soon as they reached the safety of the great liner, the storm intensified. The conditions were too rough for Captain Irving to risk sending another boat. They would have to wait for the seas to calm. The rescued men were brought inside, where they were asked to share their terrifying ordeal. The Glamorgan, which had been chartered by the Warren Line, left Liverpool on February 7th, bound for Boston. She carried general cargo and a dozen passengers, all men, as well as 2 stowaways. Like the Republic, the Glamorgan was confronted with heavy weather from the outset of the voyage. For nearly a week, she made her way across the Atlantic without too much difficulty. But by Tuesday the 13th, conditions rapidly deteriorated. What had been a typical winter gale exploded into full hurricane-force winds from the southwest. The ship rolled heavily, putting considerable strain on her hull. By that evening, the storm only grew worse. Just past midnight, a massive wave broke over her port bow and washed over the length of the ship. The force shattered her foremast, broke open her forward hatch, and shattered the covers on 2 of her stokeholds, sending water pouring into her bunkers. Despite the damage, the Glamorgan slowly recovered from the blow. Captain Court and Second Officer Robillard went to work surveying the ship. At around 2 a.m., they headed to a forward cabin and were seen peering out the forward deadlights to see if any water was entering through the damaged hatch. Suddenly, the entire ship gave a great lurch. Out of nowhere, a massive mountain of water slammed into the ship's port side. The force was enormous as the entire 1,700-ton ship submerged beneath the monstrous rogue wave. The sounds of smashing reverberated through the ship, and a huge torrent of water came surging into her engine rooms. The terrified engine crew rushed up on deck to find the ship's saloon, bridge, lifeboats, bulwarks, hatches, and stokehold covers had all been swept away. It looked as though the ship had been ripped apart by some massive blast. Smaller waves now rushed over the rubble as crewmen and passengers desperately clung for their lives. Captain Court and Second Officer Robillard were missing. The cabin they were last seen inspecting had been erased by the rogue wave. Able seaman Williams and Gerard, second steward John Barrell, and a passenger named Handy Colin, as well as one of the stowaways, whose name was never known, were all swept away by the torrent. never to be seen again. Chief Steward Ward was pulled from the debris, badly injured. He had been asleep in the cabin he shared with Second Steward Barrel when the sea smashed into them and carried Barrel overboard, while Ward clung to his berth for dear life. The ship's boilers had been extinguished, and the engine rooms were badly damaged. The bulkheads between the coal bunkers and the engines had been destroyed, and debris from the ship's superstructure had fallen into the depths of the ship, which was rapidly filling with water. Chief Engineer J. Cantley took command, and the crew managed to get one of the ship's donkey engines working and began pumping water out. But the situation was dire. The rogue wave left them with no working lifeboats, and the still heavy sea made it impossible to abandon the ailing ship. By daybreak, the donkey engine failed. A lookout was posted to search for passing ships, while the rest of the men on board formed a bucket brigade, desperately bailing water out of the flooding ship. This continued for 3 days. Most of the ship's provisions were gone, and the men survived on stores of salt pork and hardtack. By Friday morning, the men were beginning to lose hope. They had made progress bailing out the water, but it was clearly only a matter of time before the flooding got the better of them and finally claimed the Glamorgan. But just when spirits were at their lowest, the lookout spotted the Republic. By 6 p.m., the weather began to improve, and the White Star liner was able to send boats to rescue the stranded men. The luxury liner must have felt like heaven compared to what they had just endured over the previous 3 days. Chief Engineer J. Cantley was the last to leave the sinking ship. At 10 p.m., the Republic started up her engines and sailed for New York carrying the 44 survivors. Abandoned with 16 feet of water in her engine rooms, it's believed that the Glamorgan didn't survive the night. The harrowing ordeal is a reminder of the brutal power of the sea and the resiliency of the human spirit. When I was a kid, I was always told the same thing when we visited the Oregon coast. Never turn your back on the sea. Even on a beautiful, calm day, you never know what it's going to do. The men in charge of USS Memphis on August 29, 1916, were well aware of this old adage. At anchor off Santo Domingo, the flagship of the commander of the cruiser force Atlantic Fleet was prepared for the worst. The westerly current caused the ship to ride heading east, and a particularly steep, narrow shelf with a sudden drop-off from 10 to 100 fathoms offered almost no room for error. The Memphis kept 2 of her 16 boilers lit. In the event of an emergency, she could get underway in 45 minutes with enough power to maneuver the cruiser to safety. The crew was well prepared for such a situation. Just 1 week prior, a sudden storm blew in from the south. The ship was brought up to power in less than 45 minutes, ready to haul anchor and move out to sea. Ultimately, her commander decided to stay put, and the storm passed without doing any harm. But her officers were pleased with the readiness of the crew. USS Memphis, originally named USS Tennessee, was launched on December 3, 1904. The lead ship of her class, she was built by the Cramp Shipbuilding Company in Philadelphia. Coming in at 15,712 long tons while fully loaded, she measured 504 feet 5 inches, or 153.75 meters in length, with a beam of 72 feet 10 inches, or 22.2 meters. Her draft measured 25 feet, or 7.6 meters. Her career was largely unextraordinary. occupying the relative peace of the years leading up to World War I. In 1916, while the United States was still neutral, she was renamed Memphis so that her name could go to the dreadnought battleship USS Tennessee. In April 1916, USS Memphis was sent to Santo Domingo to monitor the civil war that had erupted across the Dominican Republic. By the afternoon of August 29th, the sea was rough, but it was nothing out of the ordinary for the area. The day was routine for the Memphis, and regular boats ferried sailors to and from the shore, the last leaving the ship at 3:30 p.m. But suddenly at 3:45, the order rang out to get ready to get underway and secure the ship for sea. Many down below had no idea why the order was given. There was no wind, and the sky was clear. The ship barely seemed to move, and her barometer gave normal readings. Nothing to indicate a sudden storm. Nonetheless, the crew sprang into action. The ship abruptly began to roll, but it wasn't until they arrived on deck did the crew catch sight of what sparked the alarm. Off to the east, a massive wall of water some 75 feet or 23 meters high stretched across the horizon. As it raced toward the shore, the sea began to churn heavily. Soon, wave after wave began smashing over the Memphis, each one higher than the last. Water washed over her decks and bridge, with swells pouring through her gun ports and ventilators, which were 50 feet or 15 meters above the waterline. Crews struggled to build up steam so the Memphis could weigh anchor and move to the safety of the open sea. But the violent rolling and pitching, as well as the torrents of water pouring into the ship, made the task impossible. Anchored nearby, the gunboat USS Castine also struggled to build up steam. Men on the Memphis watched in horror as the smaller ship vanished time and time again in the violent swells. Even more terrifying, the Memphis's motor launch was headed back to the ship when the massive swells began. Trapped in the tempest, the small boat soon turned over around 500 meters from the Memphis. The men were thrown into the roiling sea. 25 of them never made it back to shore. Luckily, USS Castine finally managed to pick up steam and eventually cleared the area. The ship was badly damaged and barely seaworthy, but she managed to escape. The Memphis, on the other hand, was not so lucky. The violent waves caused her anchor to drag, and the ship was pushed closer to shore. She soon touched bottom again and again, damaging her propellers. Battered by the roiling sea with water pouring into her engine rooms, it was impossible to build up the steam needed to escape. The ship was left powerless as the massive wall of water on the horizon finally reached her. At 4:30 p.m., the waves smashed hard into the ship, washing well above the height of her funnels. The ship was thrown over under Port Bilge, sending men and anything that wasn't bolted down flying. Many feared that the ship would turn over completely, but as the wave passed, she slowly righted. She was run over by at least 2 more massive waves that left her firmly some 75 yards away from the nearby cliffs. The heavy surf continued to batter away at the stranded ship. About 90 minutes after the first waves began, the Memphis was left a total wreck. Rescue efforts soon began. Lines were established, and over the next 3.5 hours, 750 men were evacuated from the ship. The incident left 43 dead. 5 were killed when they attempted to leave the ship by lifeboat after she grounded. The rest were washed overboard, or killed down below when boilers exploded in the violent fight to save the ship. A further 204 were injured. Chief Machinist Mate George William Rudd, Lieutenant Claude Ashton Jones, and Machinist Charles H. Wiley were awarded the Medal of Honor for their heroic efforts to save their fellow men. For years, the incident was believed to have been caused by a tsunami, but more recently, this explanation has been called into question. There were no records of any seismic activity in the Caribbean that day, and the characteristics and movements of the waves described by witnesses did not match the typical tsunami. The tragic event more closely shared the characteristics of waves generated by wind. Upon further review, oceanographers found that there were 3 hurricanes active at the time. One of these, Hurricane 8, passed by the island from the same direction that the waves originated. While the Category 1 hurricane was miles away, it could have been capable of generating waves that swelled to massive proportions by the time they reached the shallows where USS Memphis was anchored. The ship was deemed a total loss. She was stricken from the Naval Vessel Register on December 17, 1917, and the wreck was eventually sold for scrap. The armored cruiser was slowly broken apart on site, but the task proved difficult. The wreck remained a fixture in the area for the next 2 decades, before finally her last remnants vanished into the angry sea. It may seem counterintuitive, but ships are most vulnerable near the shore. USS Memphis and this next story are prime examples. For days, the 1,785-ton iron-hulled passenger steamer Daniel Steinmann was enveloped by a thick fog as she made her way from Antwerp to Halifax in the spring of 1884. Built in Antwerp in 1875, the Khedive was built for Ace Myers and Company. She was sold to the White Cross Line in 1877 and renamed Daniel Steinmann, after the company's Swiss founder. Coming in at 277.5 feet or 84.6 meters in length, with a beam of 34.5 feet or 10.5 meters, the vessel was part of the company's fleet of 4 passenger cargo liners. She had a 2-cylinder compound inverted steam engine that drove a single propeller. Her power was supplemented by 2 barkentine-rigged masts. She was capable of reaching up to 10.5 knots. By the afternoon of April 3, 1884, Captain Schoonhoven had been on the bridge for 2 days and 2 nights due to the fog and heavy weather. He and his officers knew that they were approaching Nova Scotia, and lookouts scanned the thick horizon searching for the beacons of the lighthouses that marked the rugged shoreline. The area was well known for its wrecks, most famously the White Star liner SS Atlantic, which ran aground almost exactly 11 years before on April 1, 1873, killing 535 people. Finally, just after 4 p.m., Captain Schoonhoven spotted a light approximately 10 miles away. He ordered his ship slowed from 3 miles per hour to just 1.5 miles per hour. At 9 p.m., the second mate took a sounding of 35 fathoms. The rain began to ease, and the men on the bridge believed the weather was about to clear. Some reports claimed that the captain personally climbed the ship's mast to get a better view of the light, which he mistook for the Chebucto headlight. Around half an hour later, another sounding showed 26 fathoms. At that moment, the captain realized that he was actually looking at the light from Sambro Island. He immediately put the helm hard a port, but just as the ship began to turn, she struck the rocks. Only a few moments later, she struck again, this time with more force, ripping into her engine room and disabling her rudder, leaving the ship powerless in the pounding surf. The situation was dire, but the mood on board was generally calm. Most of the passengers were asleep when the first blow rang through the ship. While many slept through the initial impact, the second sent a far greater jolt that reverberated through the ship, sending most up on deck. Captain Schoonhoven ordered the port anchor drop to prevent the ship from drifting further into the dangerous rocks. At the same time, the ship's 4 lifeboats were prepared. Women and children were ordered into the boats. But just as they were being filled and swung out, the relative calm on board dissolved into chaos as the gravity of the situation became apparent. Screams rang out from frightened passengers as crew shouted orders at one another, struggling to hear each other over the commotion. At around this time, Captain Schoonhoven realized that the port anchor was not holding, and the ship was still drifting. He raced forward to inspect the chain, but just as he reached the foredeck, a much more terrifying sight caught his attention. A massive wall of water that towered high above his ship was racing straight for them. He only just managed to grab hold of the fore-rigging when the ship, which had been relatively stable, gave a violent lurch as the massive rogue wave slammed into them. It washed down the length of the ship forward to aft, sweeping nearly everyone on the deck into the roiling sea. Badly damaged, the Daniel Steinmann almost immediately began her final plunge, sinking only moments after the massive wave washed over her. In the chaos, crew members managed to cut her jolly boat free from the hurricane deck and climb in before it was swept clear from the ship. A few survivors managed to climb into the small boat and make it to shore. None of the other lifeboats survived the sudden torrent of water. Meanwhile, local fishermen sprang into action and attempted to save who they could, but their efforts were mostly fruitless. 90 passengers and 34 crew were drowned. Many of their bodies were never recovered from the roiling sea. Only 9 men, including Captain Schoonhoven, were saved. A court of inquiry found that the captain followed proper procedure up until the light was spotted, and he did everything he could to save as many lives as possible after the accident occurred. But once the light was spotted, due to the low visibility and increasingly shallow soundings, he should have dropped anchor and waited until their position was established before proceeding. No disciplinary actions were taken, and he went on to captain future vessels. While almost completely forgotten today, the tragedy is a stark reminder of the unpredictable power of the sea. A power that, try as we might, we will never fully tame. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, support the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.